Jason's a freak of nature. He is very good at learning things fast.
The difference between a good coder and a great coder is knowing where to copy paste from. Somebody had told me that TypeScript was for Angular. My mindset has always been very problem focused, and how do we solve said problem?
Yay. Doesn't seem like anything crashed. How you doing, Jason? Good to have you here.
I'm doing good. How are you?
Really good. Fantastic to have you. For those that don't know, Jason's, is it fair to say old friend at this point? It's been what, like a bit over half a year? Almost a year, actually.
Oh my God.
Time flies.
Why? Why does time have to fly like that? That sucks.
Yeah, it's going fast, but also we're making a ton of progress on both our sides, and I'm so excited to talk all about that. For those who don't know Jason, he is the creator of an awesome charity, YouAreRAD. I'm sure we'll talk all about that in a bit. The reason I know Jason is he was trying to build tech for the charity, specifically building a website that was better than the Squarespace stuff they were dealing with, found himself learning all the tech that we talk about all the time, everything from Tailwind to Next.js to obviously React and Vercel. And after asking some friends like for help and thoughts on the stuff he was doing, he was introduced to me, and we immediately hit it off, chatted a bunch about the tech. Jacob, who's in chat here, we actually rewrote their open source repo in TypeScript over a weekend for fun. And since then, I've just been so impressed specifically with how Jason learns and how he applies the things that he learns. And I wanted to bring him on the show to talk about that, because I think that we all could learn a whole bunch about learning from Jason. So yeah. Great to meet you. Great to have you on, man.
Yeah, no, that's my pleasure. And yeah, I think I got recommended to reach out to you after people got tired of me pinging them with questions that they couldn't answer anymore. Went from asking the basics to like, can you put a header inside of a section element? Does this work like this? Do I need Express with Next.js? To much more complex API interactions, and yeah, just go bother someone else with these questions.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a bother. I'd say it's one of like the most enjoyable. I don't want to even call it mentorship because it's been very like bi-directional, but it's been the most fun I have had watching somebody as they learn, for sure. I was just fascinated with the way that you applied yourself and your philosophy around knowledge and information diving in. So I'd love to hear a bit more about, like, first off, RAD, but then specifically what about RAD brought you to technology and building web stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So RAD, I guess the best way I've found to describe RAD is that RAD is a universal mental health care system. It is a nonprofit that helps people all over the world access and afford mental health care. What that looks like at scale is we've helped about 40,000 people, and we've done this across about 135 countries now. So yeah, finding therapists, paying for said therapist. It is a day in, day out thing. And it is just something that I absolutely love. I never really expected it to get to this point. I think initially, unfortunately, the thought process behind all of this was I didn't want to be here anymore. And I figured that to justify no longer being here anymore, I needed to maybe help somebody who was also thinking of taking their life. And, if I could stop them from going through with that, somehow that would balance things out. And at the time, I hadn't left home in years, didn't think I could leave home, had some really crippling anxiety issues that stopped me from leaving home. And the only real way I had to interact with the outside world was World of Warcraft. So I started trying to reach out to people in World of Warcraft and convince them not to take their life. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. To me, it very much, now that I look back, makes sense that I'm where I am now. It my mindset has always been very problem focused, and how do we solve said problem, um, and not very idea. Let's see if this idea actually applies to anything kind of mindset. Um, there was a time where finding therapists for people became much more complex than just Google searching local therapists in someone's area. And so solving the problem of how to find somebody the right therapist, or even what is the right therapist, was the focus. Then over time, it was, okay, I could find people great therapists, but if they can't afford therapy, well, then it doesn't really matter if I find them a good therapist or a great therapist. How do we help people afford therapy? Um, Initially, I was just boosting people in World of Warcraft and League of Legends to pay for people's therapy, um, but that changed over time. Um, and at some point, I reached the problem of websites are ridiculously expensive. People continuously have issues accessing our website. How do we have a better website so that more people can get helped? And yeah, I think after getting a quote from an agency that did a lot of nonprofits that I really respected, a quote of like $250,000. And this would, from what I could tell, probably have been some kind of WordPress site. I was just like, this isn't, no, I'm going to take some time. And if I can save us $250,000 in just worked hours, it's worth it. And I just hit the ground running with that. That is the motivation.
Yeah, unreal. I want to emphasize for like everyone in the audience how much this is like the philosophy I preach. The best way to get good at something and to do the right thing is to start with the problem. And in every part of the journey that Jason described here, there was a problem and he found a way to solve it, whatever it took. As far from how do I keep myself going to how do we get people therapy who can't afford it to how do we do this with money we don't have? How do we solve the problem of the website being awful and people having problems with it without this resource of incredible cash that we could be spending on therapy instead? And I think that really shows with how you've taken to the things you've taken to and how much success you found in them.
Oh, well, thank you. I think the part of me that is prone to doing that is kind of still a mystery, or like why I tend to approach things that way. But I can't really imagine looking at businesses in any other way. It should very much be very like solution focused, adding features, what is needed. To me, it's all a response to feedback. It's all from constantly asking the question of what the problem is and coming up with the solution. um, I think that's just the only way things should work. But again, I don't really know, because I'm just learning all of this as I go.
There's a lot of people who are just in for the joy of tinkering and playing with things and learning. And what's fun with you is I see that too, like the way you jump on Svelte and play with all that, or like the crazy typography playgrounds. Those aren't necessarily solving an immediate problem you have, but they're still interesting and fun in ways to grow. A lot of people have that, but not the problem solving, like attention and focus. You have a really unique blend of both.
I think it actually comes from gaming in some ways. like the games that I play and like are like Dark Souls style games, games where you're constantly being punished and have to learn from being punished. Um, Coding feels very much the same. Um, oh man, it's actually, I think why I've fallen in love with TypeScript is, um, with just plain JS, there's not that immediate feedback. There's either this shit is completely broken, and I don't know why. But TypeScript is more, that doesn't look right, and you're like, oh well, here's this hint. Let me rework this and figure this out, and like, I don't know. Somehow I just like bumping into walls over and over again until I find the door. I think
JavaScript's
that's
like playing with the HUD off.
it really is. But I guess I can look at my journey of learning all of this stuff as something that's really important. It's something that I've consistently tried to write down and document, because I've noticed that I do this for a lot of things. Um, and those things that I do this for, I tend to master, within days, weeks, months. Like even now, so much of what I've been focused on lately has been routers and routing systems, like really diving into Node and complex Node use cases for fun. I don't know what's wrong with me, but
It's
yeah,
enjoyable. Like,
I love it. I absolutely love it. Um, but I'm slowly but surely recreating all of like our donor system. The other week, I recreated a whole shop experience entirely with hooks and no third party packages, which was interesting. I had no idea shopping cart feature was that complicated. And I learned about context. So that was a lot of fun, but
one
it's
of the
all,
yeah, sorry. There's an
I,
npm package I remember that like was a really big deal. It got somebody a job, and like it's now part of Spot or Shopify. It's React use shopping cart. It's like a package just for that because of how hard that specific problem is.
it yeah, it can be. It definitely can be. I've tried using use shopping cart. I've used it. I've used a version of that that uses crypto to secure a lot of the logic behind it, and then just going to a pure hooks focused approach. That was a lot of fun, but yeah, it is. It's the same process for me every single time of starting with this very basic problem, and then learning how to actually understand and define that problem. It's like one of the ways that I've seen this put before is in psychotherapy. We'll have someone that says maybe they want to lose weight for whatever reason, maybe they want to gain weight for whatever reason. They come in and they usually have some kind of negative question that is posed to themselves. Why do I look this way? Why do I feel this way? Um, why am I overweight? Why am I underweight? That question, in theory, is solvable. That is a question that does have some kind of answer, but it's not coming from a place that's looking for an answer. It's coming from self-deprecation. It's coming from just putting ourselves down. And what we'll tend to do in therapy is try and reframe that to what would it look like to be healthier? What would I need to do to be healthier? What would I feel like? What would I look like? What tendencies would I have? What actions would I take? And as we reframe that, we start to come down to actionable steps. And I think that's exactly how I tend to approach this. Um, it's not so much, it might begin with like, how do I build a website? But it increasingly becomes, what would it look like to have a modern website? What would it look like to have an accessible website? And then starting to break down, okay, so what does accessibility mean to me? What does accessibility even mean? I'm learning the standards of that. What does a modern website look like? Starting with zero, absolutely zero experience whatsoever of coding. I didn't know what React was, didn't know what Next.js was, didn't know the relationship between these. I think I remember telling you, but somebody had told me that TypeScript was for Angular, and that's just it. Like, that's, don't use it otherwise. It's unnecessary. But I didn't even know that TypeScript was JavaScript. I didn't know what type safety was. It was just, figure it out. So I had to really learn and define what all of this looked like to begin with.
I really like that framing of, like, specifically like reframing the problem into something actionable. That's something I guess it's one of those things I don't think about because I'm lucky that most of the problems I think about are ones that I've framed in that way myself, but I don't think about this other side. I'm incredibly lucky. I've never been comfortable describing a feeling I had as anxiety because I don't ever have like the paralyzing feeling of stress from a thing that I could be working on. That is a thing I've personally never really had in a strong way. And because of that, a lot of the stuff you described here is stuff I actually don't resonate with, but I think that's why it's so important. I need to adjust my approach because I'm so hard on like find a problem and then solve it. I don't talk anywhere near enough about working on the problem before you work on the solution, if that makes sense. Like, how do you shape this problem in a way where you can then hammer at it rather than just going straight in?
Yeah. It is a really tough thing for me at times too, because I'll realize that I think I'm just looking for stuff to work on at times. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there is anything, or that even, the solution that I have that I really want to use applies to a particular problem. There's this very famous therapist, Abraham Maslow, that used to say, when all you have is a hammer, every problem in your life tends to look like a nail. And applying that, just definitely doesn't always work for us. When I go through and try and figure out what it is that I'm working on, it's usually something that it's clear that this is a need. Like the website, there was really no way around it. We needed a website. People were telling me that it was not accessible, that it was not usable. So that already begins to outline the work ahead. And then figuring out how you even approach a problem like that. This was something that was all kinds of adventure. First I had to figure out how you even build websites. It didn't take long to figure out that something HTML, like building a MySpace profile, but a little bit more in depth. And I started looking into the best websites. Google makes this kind of approach very, very easy. What are the best websites? Best websites 2022. Best designs 2022. And starting to see tons and tons of different websites, getting an idea of how websites look, how they function, looking into how these are even getting measured, why they're getting selected. And I think as I was seeing a lot of these returns, these Google search returns, I kept seeing Jamstack. I couldn't quite understand what Jamstack was. But every time I looked up these top websites, speed, reliability, and future, these kinds of terms consistently aligned with Jamstack. I started reading into what a Jamstack was and seeing the different pieces. JavaScript, it's a JavaScript website. didn't really understand what that was. But then I started looking at top Jamstack websites. And then you start to see some of the more relevant terms now. Well, looking back now that I see they're much more relevant, like React, like Vue, however that's pronounced.
I'll never get any of Evan Yu's projects pronounced right.
There we go. I started seeing Ember. I started seeing all kinds of different terms, but it was consistently these things. And then I discovered in all of this searching for best Jamstack websites, a list of people who were related to these. I found Lee Robb. I found Dan Abrams, I think.
Abramov.
Abramov.
Yeah, he was actually the first interview on my YouTube channel. Fun fact.
Oh, hell. I think I remember that, actually. As I found them, I then got introduced to GitHub, which I'd never heard of before. Like, that's something so foreign if you have no background in coding or experience with coding. And I saw that these were websites, their websites, how they approach things. I started searching GitHub's trending and just following this pattern of what people used to build a website, and started to write down a lot of this data. What did people use when they were prototyping, showing off? Kind of, here is a cool thing, versus what do they use when they are doing production level code, when it's like, I need something battle tested. And those kept aligning to Next.js, React. I kept seeing those words, and Tailwind. Tailwind kept popping up as futuristic. People were starting to move it into production. Some people were saying, no, it's not ready for production. But consistently, some of the heavy hitters were moving into using Tailwind in production. And there it was. Like, I had a stack. I knew I needed to use these tools. I had some examples of what it looked like when these tools were combined. And I pretty much took Lee Robb's website and just tried to break it over and over again. I knew what it looked like when it worked. If I broke it, what would it look like to solve it? And over the course of about 2 months, learned how to do all of that for our use case, for our website's use case. Eventually also learning within that 2 months how to interact with Stripe and other APIs, mostly Supabase, Stripe. What else did we use back then?
Vercel you were pretty early on Vercel.
Yeah, Vercel. Vercel was like a default for sure. Definitely in that stack. Eventually figured out Framer, Motion, and motion animations.
Yeah, good shit.
I love Framer.
It's so
that's
cool.
So much fun to play with. But that was the approach, is researching who does what, how they do this, and copying that. It was something else. It was 2 months of just straight grinding.
There's so many incredible nuggets in there. One of the first things I want to point out is how much it feels like you were looking into how things were being used rather than documents about them. Like, rather than like reading blog posts and reading the get started for everything in all their docs, you were more looking at the way these things were being applied. An idea you touched on with me before, and it's like one of my favorite phrases that I use all the time now, is applied wisdom. It's not just about this knowledge and it existing in a box somewhere. It's much more important to see how that knowledge is used and applied. And you can get so much more from that, especially in your use case of, I don't know a thing about any of this. A lot of this content isn't targeted at me because I don't know a thing about any of this. So rather than reading a bunch of docs, I should see how people are using this.
Yeah. I mean, that's applied wisdom is, yeah, it to me is not very helpful to read through a lot of the docs or to watch a lot of the videos, because there is something missing there for me. There's like a common language that's being spoken in it. I think about this anytime I try and teach. You have to have some sort of common language, and everybody's different. Everybody starts at a different level. Um, so it was very important for me to not necessarily try and catch up to a certain common language or common knowledge base, but to look at what the finished product looked like, what it would look like to be fluent, and then break all of that down, um, and learn it in that sense. It was, yeah, I like to contextualize some of this. It always threw me off when I would go to a repo and it wouldn't say npm install X package. If it said install and then dash save or dash dash save or dash dash dev, I didn't understand what any of that meant. And it was always really frustrating for me when I would see that missing. Like, how am I supposed to know how to install this? Or if there is any particular way to install this, what is the difference? Why are people using Yarn? What is Yarn adds equivalent in npm? All of these things I just kind of had to figure out. And so when you go into, somebody's dev docs, a lot of the times it's just assumed you know enough to even be there. So I just got out of the habit of doing that and into the habit of, let's just figure it out by doing.
Sorry, I was taking my cat's collar off so he doesn't dox me with my phone number.
Oh,
Yeah, he's very
clever.
cute, but keeps rotating. God, there's so many interesting nuggets in there. Like those are things that like I, as a person who has been doing this for 6 years, don't think about. Like I don't like the difference between npm and Yarn is that Yarn's kind of old now and npm was bad and now is good. Like it was a difference that mattered a lot like a while back and doesn't now. But you don't have any of that context or knowledge or a good way to figure out where to find that as a newcomer. And the this is really interesting because I don't think about these things, but also fascinating because I was already impressed with how much crap you had to work through to get as good as you did as fast as you did. And now I am even more so because there's a whole different tier of things I didn't think about. Like dash dash save dev is for things that don't need to go in your main bundle. I don't think about that. It just is. And that's something that like I write in readmes and don't say why. And it's incredibly helpful. Something I push when I bring on new engineers is what I call the stupid question rule. I require new hires to ask at least 3 stupid questions a day for their first few weeks. And I try to get at least one a day for a while because everybody's scared to ask a question that sounds dumb. Force them to. And once they get over it, it helps them ask the questions they were scared to, which is great. But more valuable for me is I know the things I'm glossing over that they feel stupid because I glossed over them. It's so helpful for me as a like manager and a person building up the team. If people are scared to ask dumb questions, I don't know what I'm making them feel dumb about.
I'm writing that down. That's really good. I like that. Yeah, it is a nightmare, I think, to learn how to code when you're so reliant on Googling things and searching things, especially the way that like Stack Overflow has just dominated search engine. Um, you're consistently going to find attempts to answer your question on Stack Overflow, which is absolutely riddled with solutions to jQuery or jQuery approaches to problems. You're looking at heavy class-based components, and yet knowing the difference between that, even the React documents, the non-beta documents, are really, really bad and not relevant it drove me crazy the first few months, of coding, until very recently. Should it be const something, or should it be function something? Export default function, export const, or just const something and then export default that name. Like, what's the difference? Why would I do this? Why am I seeing dot this? Why am I seeing this props? Why am I seeing like all of that stuff? Really, it's everywhere, and interlaced with that, you find solid, updated answers. So much, I think, of learning. The challenge of learning these days is, although there is information everywhere, it's being able to discern which knowledge is relevant, which information is actually good information versus bad, outdated, unnecessary, and that gets overwhelming very, very quickly. The amount of times that I've tried to copy something from Stack Overflow, only to then later realize that was never going to work because nobody approaches it this way anymore. That's not a thing people use anymore. Absolute nightmare. Gosh, that's yeah. And then trying to learn some of the intricacies. Every time React gets updated, we still leave behind so many answers that are going to come up. Using suspense and transition, all of these new React 18 features. When people Google stuff like that, they're still going to find jQuery approaches to things. They're still going to find old ways of approaching React that aren't relevant anymore.
I actually had a build issue yesterday or the day before where all the results I could find were about a weird jQuery plugin from 2011. I couldn't find any other result for a build error I was having in like a modern Next project, and I rage quit. I just nuked the project, started again, and it was fine. But like, I even run into those problems still, but I don't think of them as like blockers because that's like my reality. But when you're early, especially when you don't have resources that can parse a weird question for you, it's a lot harder. Like, one of the first skills you have to develop as a developer is the ability to take the problem you have in your head or on your computer and pick the right words to put into Google to get a result out of it. And your ability to do that is directly correlated to how much you like programming and how fast you get good. Your Google ability is essential as you get started. And the only other way you can get that info, and it's a skill you have to develop anyways, is finding the right people who can do like the personal Google for you when you don't know how to do that like translation yourself. I still run into this, especially with like weird design issues or like typography stuff that I don't understand, or like weird like deployment mechanisms or SQL stuff. I don't know enough about it to even start the Google search. So I find a person who does, help them unstupid my query so they can either help me find the solution or I can use that translation to go find it myself. I think you're exceptionally good at this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, just growing up in that early Google era, enough to have to very quickly learn stuff like that. If you ever want to find stuff online, there are optimal ways to find things, and coding. Yeah, coding that creates a lot of trail, unnecessary trail that you have to learn how to sift through. It's unfortunate, but I think too, something I've always kept to heart was this smaller YouTuber, Harry Wolf, had this saying that the difference between a good coder and a great coder is knowing where to copy paste from. And that's something that, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think you try and find the right way to frame this part. One of the things that like we touched on a bit before, but was really interesting to me was how you learned Tailwind. You specifically learned Tailwind by reading the source code for the Tailwind website. Like, that was where you started. It wasn't even the docs. It was right click inspect and seeing how they did it. And I think that blew my mind the first time you said it. And a whole bunch of things clicked from there. And I think this is kind of the same thing. Like if you don't have access to the people, you have the next best thing, which is their output. And if you use that, you can put together the pieces to some extent yourself. If you can't ask the question, why would I use Tailwind? See how they used it. And that'll bring you that answer. It'll show you the application of that wisdom, because obviously Tailwind is useful to somebody. That's why it exists. Same with even the stuff like we shit on here, like Flutter. That has to be useful for something. We're still hunting. We'll find it someday. But Flutter theoretically has to be useful for something. It's a matter of finding where that wisdom applies.
Yeah, yeah. It's looking at Tailwind and looking at how they utilize Tailwind and why they utilize Tailwind the way they did. Um, I've learned a lot about just the developer mindset in general. The mindset of, I don't know, this works, and yes, this works, but I know people are going to look at it, so let's actually clean this up a little bit and make it look just a bit nicer. These were all things that I really got to learn about Tailwind very quickly. How they fixed CSS issues, common issues with CSS, how they presented the fixes to those, and how they initially did those fixes. Um, yeah, I loved going through Tailwind's website and seeing where they actually used Tailwind versus where they still kind of did hardcore CSS. When they used modules, CSS modules, versus when they actually did everything utility wise. How much they actually stuck to their ethos of everything should be utility styled. Um, I think that taught me a lot on the application of wisdom as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's something the docs will never tell you is when to not use the thing, because they're all about how to use the thing. And what you learned there, and you found a really good way to do it, is they're preaching this philosophy. What are the bounds of it? And that's hadn't even thought of that point. That's really cool. It's actually one of the things I kind of like about the new React docs. It feels like they're more willing than average to call out what React doesn't do and where you go to solve those problems instead. And I think that's incredibly important for especially like beginner materials and documentation, because when we write those, we're writing them because we're excited about the thing. We think it solves every problem and will take over the world, but everything has bounds. And for the sake of people learning, it's so important to acknowledge them. That said, your work around here is incredible.
Oh, thank you. I think there's another thing that like really dawns on me too is just the way that everything is organized and structured is really tough to figure out, because it isn't uniform as much as it could be. I think some of the early questions that I tended to have was, when do I use a component, or create a whole new component, versus when do I just style this in CSS? This section component I use consistently. So should I create a custom component for section that takes children? Or should I just go into the CSS and, at least with Tailwind, apply these styles? How often we use that, when, and like what exactly the weight of doing something like that is. All of these things, it seems, are kind of up in the air. I can see why in large repos everything becomes a component, because you want to restrain as much as you can, or you want to be very strict, right? In smaller areas, what then does that look like? There's not as many examples of those smaller features. When you use like React Node, React Elements, all of these things seem like they're kind of scattered. Should the utilities folder include hooks, or should it be different? Should you have a separate file for types and a separate file for styles, and then kind of piece everything together in an index and export that. All of this stuff is very, very hard to find and see done consistently. And I find that even when I'm looking at particular developers throughout their personal repositories, that consistency isn't there as well. They tend to kind of just do whatever's convenient in the moment. So from the outside, yeah, very, very complicated to figure out.
Yeah, one of our oldest tickets at Ping is redo the folder structure. And we were always blocked on some big overhaul that like we don't want to make a nasty diff of. So as soon as slots merges, fingers crossed, I'm going to go gun out whole new folder structure. Generally, I think we care too much about these things. One of my favorite Dan Abramov rants is most projects should be one file for a lot longer. And the more I think about that, the more it hurts my brain and is correct. Like there's no reason to break up your components into files until you have a lot of different components and they serve entirely different roles. But like a big file's kind of underrated.
Yeah, that is something I especially have felt lately. When I'm looking at like the homepage of a website, there is this mindset to be as consistent as possible. If anything is ever going to be reused, create it as a component instead. But homepages often have very unique things to them. Homepages sometimes break the consistency on purpose. So homepages ended up being a really long file. But what do you include in there versus what do you abstract away? It was always my thought process that I wanted things to be as clean as possible. So maybe you just see a section component which takes different properties like a header text, and try and make it as tight and compact as possible. But when I go through and I look at that, I can see, oh wow, that's really clean. But when I think, but what if there's something I don't like about this? How many different layers do I have to go through to actually address the problem? And I think that becomes a huge, huge thing in my mind when I'm looking at actually organizing a project, is how many things do I have to go through? It's one thing to put types in a different file so that somebody doesn't screw up the types, or because you have like 100 types and that would be weird to see at the top of a page. And another thing to have somebody have to go into a CSS module to change, 1 point of text on something like that. That just gets super annoying. So it's, I kind of like sometimes the mess and the chaos of a larger file, so long as what I need is there and
Absolutely.
nothing more.
Yep. I'm pretty big on that. What I'll usually do now for my work is I'll make one really big file to like get everything working. And then once that's done and I'm confident in the logic and the structure, I'll break it apart in the ways that make sense in terms of how it will then be consumed. But I usually start from there. One sec, my cat's about to tear apart my entire shelf.
No worries. Oh gosh.
Sorry about that. I do want to highlight one of my favorite messages in chat so far. I wish I had an easier way to pin it. I'll build that eventually. Somebody said that you sound more senior than me, and you do. Your approach to thinking about these problems and talking through, like, something I always say is like leveling up as a developer is only so much, like especially career and like what we see as senior, principal, whatnot. Only so much of that is technical. A lot of that is your ability to communicate those hard technical problems and how you think about your solutions to them. You do a very good job of that communication. And that isn't just how you sit here and talk. It's also the way you architect and write that code, the way you described, like, how do I fix problems touching as few things as possible is one of the most important mindsets as a senior. A lot of junior devs get obsessed with architecture and structure and building things in a specific way and like pushing as far as they can in the architecture, not in the problem solving. And what I consider seniority is largely in that. And you do a very good job of communicating that way for various reasons.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm trying. It's not always easy, but I love doing that, and it's still very much this problem focused mindset of I am well right now I am redoing a lot of the website. I think I just do this for fun at this point, but I'm doing it with the mindset of I want to make this much more accessible from an open source standpoint. And so because that is like the chief problem, a lot of how I have to approach this is thinking of what would I run into? What would other people run into? Where does it start to become complicated? Even as I'm like, I've recreated like what a Twitter post looks like. And should I include the Twitter data because I'm only using certain tweets in this for the website? Do I include that in the actual components folder, or should that be abstracted away to a data folder? At what point do I just have a large tweet component where when I'm, mapping something into it, I have to map each and every type or each and every variable into it, versus when do I just create a type array of all of those things and map it once? When I'm looking at it as somebody who wants to volunteer and help out, at what level does it get complicated? And at what level is it just very clear, like, oh, that's what you're trying to do? Actually just linked to you on Discord the repo. This is the one I'm like actively building on. And this
I
is
will
where
drop
I'm
that
doing
in chat quick for others who are interested, which I'm sure there's a lot of them.
And this isn't functional by any means. This is literally just restarting. But when you look through it, you'll see where I've started to kind of annotate exactly what I'm trying to do. There's no like just testing or anything like that. But there are comments on top of the individual files to try and explain why this is being used the way it is, why it's written the way it is.
Really awesome, actually. I love this as an example of how you're thinking about these things. And obviously, if you'd like help from us in the community, I'm sure a lot of people here are not just down, but excitedly so. Also, just one other thing that you're uniquely talented in that I've found and like gotten a lot of help and advice from you. You're dope at SEO and like site metadata. You got really good at that fast. It's like hard.
I'm very particular about I think I've tried doing different approaches to this. I've recreated in one of the versions of the RAD website, essentially recreated Next SEO's entire file or an entire structure to do something that was more just what I needed, but increasingly just using Next SEO. I think that package is actually really good. But being able to layer into it, being able to make it as, I guess, modular as possible, I think has been really huge. Having the default SEO be able to touch all of the different points, and then having page-based SEO that modifies that as I go. Yeah, I really like SEO. That's I don't know why. I always hate whenever I see those ads or get those LinkedIn messages or those emails of, we want to do your SEO. And I was like, just fuck off. I don't want that. I hate SEO, but love it.
I get it. I was really nerdy about it early, but totally lost my stride in like the early 2010s and haven't jumped back on it much since. Like I get the basics, but like the PR you filed on Init Tips, let me find that quick. I'm sure I can find it pretty fast. Yes, I can. You filed an awesome pull request, and I've sent this to my team. I've sent this to other developers. I've sent this all around as like, here's a PR of a bunch of random shit that you're probably doing wrong in Next, because I was doing it wrong in Next, and Jason showed up and fixed a bunch of our stuff. Y'all might want to do this too.
Oh gosh, I'm glad I could be of help.
Yeah. Something I want to emphasize for chat, because I've seen a few people getting a feeling I've had a lot talking to you. Imposter syndrome. Jason's a freak of nature. Oh. He is very good at learning things fast. If you feel a little bad about how fast you're learning right now, good, you should. There aren't a lot of people like this. I know that 10x dev is a joke, but y'all are getting a sneak peek of what that actually looks like. It's not your ability to like know everything about technology. It's so much more about your approach, how you learn, solve problems, and don't feel bad about feeling bad. Take that as an opportunity to learn and grow. And the reason I'm emphasizing how fresh Jason isn't because I think you can get this good in 3 months. I think that's fucking bullshit. This is incredibly rare. It's because the things that Jason did to get there so fast are incredibly insightful and have helped me personally a ton in how I learn and approach new information and stuff. Like, it's so much value here isn't him being better than you. It's things you can learn from this and from our conversation.
Oh, I guess I think I appreciate that. I think the advantage that I sometimes have maybe is just because this isn't something I do for a living. I think about that a lot in my daily work of the advantages of this, particular parts of my work being optional, being exciting. Like, it's adventurous, it's exciting, it is the extra stuff. It's like a passion project, essentially. Once it stops being a passion project, though, I think it becomes harder to be passionate about it. Some of that passion is what drives wanting to look stuff like this up, wanting to keep optimizing things, wanting to build and challenge. And becomes much more, I'm just trying to get the job done so I can do something else. And I mean, I find myself having that mindset in other facets of RAD. In the website, though, it's always like, what excuse do I have to work on the website? Cool. Now I can go work on the website and learn stuff about the website.
I try to find a way to put this. You're touching on something that I try to talk about a lot here because it's so important. It's this idea of like learning through things you care about, not for the sake of learning the thing. Like, the wrong way to learn Next is to learn Next. It's to have a problem that Next solves. Same with pretty much everything we've talked about. And if that problem is something you're passionate about, you're going to push through the hard parts much more reliably. That's like, so much of our experience as developers is being wrong constantly, and that erodes at you. It has to. It's why there's such a high level of like depression and insecurity and so many other like mental health issues in software. It's our job to feel stupid constantly. That's what we do for a living. It's why we're paid so much. It's to feel bad, and you need something to get through that. For me, it was always the problems I was solving mattered so much to me that being wrong constantly didn't affect my mindset at all, because I was so excited about the problem. I think I got a lot of that from skateboarding, where you're just eating shit constantly until suddenly you ride away. And you mentioned before you got that from video games, where you're just screwing the thing up until suddenly you get it right. That is really hard to do unless you have a reason. And wanting to be a developer, I don't know if that's a good enough reason for most people. And I think that's more what's interesting to me here, is not you're not a developer for a living so much as you're not doing this to be a developer at all.
Yeah. It's such a strange thing when I look at that. It took me 2 months to figure out all of this stuff. But the mindset was never, I want to be the best developer. I want to be known for being a developer. I want to be respected as a developer. I want to be paid as a developer, not get fired as a developer. Um, it was, Rad needs a website, and I I, I have to do it. I have to build it. Um, the end result of that isn't predictable. I had no idea what that would lead to, but it did solve the problem. I have this problem though with, like, even my own stuff that I try and do on Twitch, where I think, I've got to have X amount of views, or I have to be, a known content creator in some way. And that is the wrong problem. That's not a solvable problem. That is a very different thing. If the problem in my mind instead was, how can I help people learn how to develop in this same way? How can I help people focus, and be able to, I guess, be more efficient with their day? You find the ways to approach that, and people are either interested in it or not. And you learn, well, just because I wanted to show people this, or just because I wanted to do this, doesn't mean that people actually wanted that or needed that. Um, those are all things that strike me, just in the moment, I guess.
I Yeah, I totally agree. I'm also getting a little distracted by a message I didn't like, so I'm going to go on a quick rant. Somebody said something along the lines of they feel like a lot of newer devs are just in it for money and salary and aren't getting in for the right reasons.
Hmm.
Don't think it's our role to say aren't the right reasons for somebody to get into dev. If they get in and they get in, cool. We can help people whose reasons align with us be successful by giving them support and resources and whatever we can. But more importantly, for every one person here who's hanging out on a Wednesday afternoon watching us live on Twitch talk about this, there are 49 developers that need to be maintaining an old like Lisp or COBOL code base or some PHP code that nobody wants to touch. Like, for every one of us bleeding edge lunatics that love doing stuff like this, there needs to be a lot of developers maintaining Google's crumbling infrastructure. We can get frustrated with those people for existing and for doing things different from how we like. But the reality is, for us to do what we do, we need people to maintain the tech debt that we're creating in our wake. And that's what we do when we push like the bounds and keep doing shit like this. For this to happen, we need lots of developers who don't give a shit to maintain the stuff that we're building. And that is hard work, and they are paid fairly for the hard work they're doing. And I'm out here throwing away my $400,000 a year salary to complain on Twitch about it because that's what I chose to do. I'm not normal. We're not normal. And shaming the people who are is not something I'm down for.
Yeah. I can see where we romanticize what a developer is, what a coder is. This person who, is constantly solving problems, coming up with intuitive solutions, ingenious solutions. They're really living up to this engineer, that sometimes gets added to the end of software. And I mean, that's cool. I think it is great to have pride in what you do, and take pride in what you do. But I guess at the same time, yeah, it is totally fair that this is a way to make ends meet. I'm consistently more amazed by the people who work is a means to do other things in life. Like, it is one of the least important things for them. It's, yeah, I want to travel, and this is something that I can do on the move. And this is, yeah, I do my time. something I've even learned, in hiring people, is to not romanticize even my own work, and apply that to others. You don't have to be overly passionate about mental health care and wanting to change the world. I don't want RAD or working at RAD to be your life. I don't want this to be your identity, your ego. Um, I instead, I just need to set the minimum for quality of work and time put in to something that I actually accept and actually enjoy. And if I'm not impressed with that, maybe the minimum's too low. Maybe I need to set the bar a little bit higher, but it is definitely not the expectation that work should be somebody's life like it is mine. I'm glad I can be happy with that. But
Yeah. The
if the
the work
minimum's
is
high
life.
enough, it's fine. No, that's it. That's it.
Yeah. The work is life folks like us can solve a certain class of problem much more effectively. And that problem's like the 0 to like 10 problem of like getting the thing going and getting it going well. But in that process, we create a whole additional set of classes of problems, of tech debt, of like accounting failure decisions. I know I have plenty of those we're dealing with, like those types of things, because we are so invested in moving fast. We're doing things we don't know how to do. If there's somebody who is exclusively responsible for doing that one thing, that is a boring thing. That's not how we like to do things. We like to try and experiment with and do things all the time and be wrong. Our desire to be wrong and learn on the fly causes us to create a class of problem we need those boring people to solve for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I can't imagine the being a maintainer is such a thankless job, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I like go through and just enjoy being able to pick at different things, solve different problems in the moment, and then just move on. That's something very fortunate to be able to do.
On the maintainer topic, one of the things that really stood out to me from your process, I don't know how to put this other than you just, as soon as you started like using things and getting them, started throwing money at them. Like I think you're at like, just from the ones I know about, at least $500 a month of contributions to random open source projects that you use. Like you go out of your way to thank the people you just described as thankless. And I thought that was outstanding, especially for someone early enough that your stereotype is normally complaining about problems. You're doing the opposite. You're throwing them cash as thanks for their work. And that stood out to me.
Oh, well, thank you.
Don't thank me.
Yeah,
I'm thanking you as a person who hadn't contributed for like the 8+ years. I would throw code every once in a while, but it was usually bad. You're out here 3 months in, like throwing $250 to TRPC a month when I haven't even thought of throwing money at him, and immediately had to match it at ping because we're not going to let you outclass our spend on TRPC. That's not fair.
I mean, it just, I guess it just made sense to me at the, it's so weird. Like I definitely, is somebody who runs a nonprofit, contribute to nonprofits, but yeah, open source projects are essentially the same thing. They just don't get any of the tax benefit, but that, one person out there that's maintaining something that a dozen other big packages depend on, like, we got to help that person out. And I mean, with TRPC, it's all of our routing features depend on that. Our contact to our database router, our donation process router, all depends on that existing. If that ceased to exist or wasn't updated, moving things to the next or the latest Next.js release or the latest React release, that becomes a huge challenge for everyone. I'm really surprised that a lot of corporations in tech don't have some kind of set aside fund to maintain projects that they're dependent on, or maybe they're not even aware. Who knows?
Yeah, I think the first company value on like the ping company value like doc I made when I started things was contribute to those who let us do this, and that means financially. I even like said that in the byline of it to be clear, like we put our money where our support comes from. It's the people who make it this possible for us. They get paid for it. Period. That's just one of the rules. And as soon as we got our first like real investment, I immediately started paying $250 a month to OBS from company money because we exist because of OBS and we're building directly into it. We're working closely with them. It is essential that OBS continues to be great for us to succeed.
Yeah. Open source world. It's beautiful. It's I'm trying to contribute more to it in the sense of like actual code. We did a giveaway very recently in VR chat, and this was something that I was looking around and just really struggled to find things that I liked within that, like the solutions to managing giveaways. So I just decided to build all of that from scratch. And right now I'm in the process of converting all of that from like, I needed to build this in 24 hours. And the code looks like that to, now I'd love for this to be an open source thing that any charity can clone and just start to run with. I think there's a lot of room for those kinds of open source projects that a developer involved with a nonprofit can pick up and run with. And, it's just one way to kind of keep adding into that. I mean, and this site is spaghetti code for the most part, but it uses Three.js to just have some floating stars and moving stuff. It uses Stripe to handle all of the donations and the entries. Some of this is a little rough around the edges, but like if you want to enter without contributing, a way of gating some of that is it will use Twilio to do that OTP and manage all of those pieces. Of course, this all routes then into Supabase once the contribution has been confirmed to then array all of the donors' information into Supabase. Everything. I think I was using Supabase initially on its own, but then introduced SendGrid as well to just send additional confirmation emails that a contribution went through. But now, I want to make this open source. So
yeah, this looks awesome for like showing how all these pieces go together. I see people mentioning in chat, Jacob, of course, offering to help polish it up if you want any help. And I want to emphasize that side of open source. Like open source is give take, but not in as binary a way as I think you're thinking of it here, where you've taken so much from open source by using all these things. So now you have to give back. The process of giving is also a back and forth. So if you want to open source something and you want to like contribute to open source, that is a thing that you're going to have to take a lot during that exchange. You're going to need help from people like Jason or Jacob and me. You're going to need help from the maintainers of the things you want to contribute to. But that's not just okay. That's awesome. It's one of the coolest parts of the open source process is that it is just as much about the community and communication as it is about the code. It's easy to get in the mindset of, I need to share code back into the ether because I've taken so much from it, but it's not that. I've struggled with this a bit myself. I don't feel like I'm giving enough to open source right now. And in a lot of ways, I'm not. I don't open source a lot of code. And when I do, it's like dumb toy projects I built on Stream. But the value I bring to open source is bringing attention to the things that aren't getting it and trying to like fix these problems at a different level. I'm a magnifying glass, not a hammer. And that's not just okay. It's in a lot of ways necessary because not enough people are doing it. And I've gotten so much thanks from open source maintainers for the help I've given with like branding and signal boosting and just bringing them on the show like this. Like that is a great way to contribute to open source too. Just being a person that talks about these things.
Yeah. I'm trying to like actually learn and solidify that mindset. to some degree, like I'm always in this space where I need to build or do the thing, and then that's my contribution. And if I can't complete it, then it just kind of sits dormant. Um, but some of the reality is, like, if I'm just openly talking about this problem and starting to build some momentum of working on it, there are tons of people who can jump in and actually also work on that, amplifying that is a thing, and that there is even a framework for solving that. It is, I mean, it's hard. It's a hard thing to do.
It'll also keep you more on top of it and make it way clearer when you hit that point where the thing is good enough and is like ready for people to use. If you have people using it too early when it's not ready, it's much easier to tell when it is versus waiting until you think you're at that point. You can't know until it's broken for 20 people if it's ready for the 21st.
Yeah, that I find all those things all of the wrong ways. Like that. I think where I'm at in doing this rebuild of the RAD site is, I'm aware that increasingly we actually need to build a backend donor database. Doing everything through Stripe and Supabase is rough. Doing it through Stripe and checking all of our donation logs means giving more access to people to Stripe, which is very, very sensitive. Doing things out of Supabase is nice, but having our own thing for that is kind of a necessary evolution. Having a more advanced monthly giving program, that's something where I've been looking for lots of help and trying to just solve it on my own, because wanting to do this use case where somebody becomes a monthly donor and then gets permissions on Discord, being able to do the same thing, but also log this data for someone who decides to donate monthly via Twitch Prime instead of via Stripe. Being able to equally log all of this data if somebody donates via PayPal or Venmo or bank transfer. There's so many just fine pieces to that. And then making this data totally accessible to people on our team who don't know anything about coding. They know about donor management, donor engagement. They just want to see a spreadsheet at the end of the day. All of that is kind of where I actually need the most help. But even as I'm steadily building this stuff and learning this stuff, I'm finding out the problems in real time when a donation doesn't log to Supabase, and I'm like, oh shit, why could that be? Well, all of that code base is private, and nobody can help me if I'm stuck with that. But with the giveaway thing, I love the giveaway stack that it currently uses, because in theory, nothing here costs money. Running up a Supabase free account will manage all of this no problem, unless you actually have hundreds of thousands of people entering. But I actually have stress test this by creating over 300,000 records in 5 seconds. Supabase took all of it. Just
Somebody was just saying
initially
in
didn't
chat that they
intend to
didn't
do
think
that.
Supabase scaled, and I quickly jumped on them. Like, yeah, there are tiers of usage Supabase doesn't serve yet, but they're giving you one of the easiest interfaces to Postgres in the world, and it scales fine. When you run into problems, you're now at a size where you can hire a dedicated team to fix them. Like, that's just not something you're realistically going to run into.
I mean, I can see where I would want to use something like Planet Scale if I have a ton of concurrent things. Like if I am running a social media platform and I've got tons of people actively doing all of these things, for sure. Supabase, just reading and writing into it, I mean, you really have to try and break it. Initially, I didn't even mean to stress test it in the way that I did. When I updated the giveaway app to React 18, I wasn't aware of the use effect issue, where it just, at least with TRPC, it infinitely ran use effect. There was no end to that loop. So I was just mutating data as fast as it could possibly go, um, which was somewhere around like 30,000 writes to that database a second. And it just blew up. And then I actually really pushed it to its breaking point, and that was a lot of fun. But it just, like, the browser itself crashed before I ever got to a point where Supabase slowed down.
That makes sense. I Planet scale users have had some fun issues where, because perf is so good, even at like insane use levels, they end up racking up crazy builds because they don't realize they're writing like 500 million rows a day or in reading like a billion plus. There's a few really funny blog posts about that because of how the performance scaling so well. It's almost a bug as much as a feature because it like hides a class of bugs that you might be introducing. So that's also a very like valuable thing to think about when you make these types of decisions, is not taking advantage of performance unintentionally by writing bad code. There's one really good question that somebody asked that I keep like getting baited away from, and I want to add a tiny bit of framing to it. Something I feel like you know you could do, and we've touched on it a bit, but you don't yet, is taking advantage of all of us. I almost feel like you're a little shy to ask questions at times, but we're hungry for it. Like when I started Ping, I had Alex from TRPC in the code base, like making changes and fixing my like stupid mistakes using his library. Like I guarantee you people like Tanner from React Query, knowing you and like what you're working on, would love to help however he could, or a bunch of people in chat. The reason I'm bringing this up is one of the developers in this community, Sokarel, just asked, what is the best way to help RAD, or you specifically, with your mission? Obviously, donating and things are an option, but how can we help? How can the 100 developers listening live right now help you achieve your goals?
I mean, oh boy. Yeah, I'm not good at asking for support in that way. That's always been difficult.
You're not
Really
asking
odd
for
that I run a
support.
charity.
You're sharing with us what we could do to help. This isn't an ask, this is an opportunity. And that's how everyone here is going to see it. It's an opportunity to contribute to an awesome person doing an awesome thing. It's not you asking us for help. Clearly, you're going to do this yourself if we don't help you at all. That was always the case. We are eagerly wanting to help because it makes us feel better too. Most of us are hacking at big business companies, and you're making mental health better and saving lives. I guarantee you all the devs here want to help how they can.
That is very appreciated. Okay, so tier list of ways to help. Becoming a monthly donor is probably the biggest. Yeah, right now that's probably the biggest, because we cover the cost of therapy for people. Having monthly reoccurring revenue for us is absolutely critical. It gives us the ability to anticipate how many more people we can add into our program. Gives us a safety net for covering therapy, which is obviously ongoing. That's a big piece. If you are looking to volunteer skill set as a dev, the repos that I've linked, the main one is the YouAreRAD repo, or YouAreRAD web. That is becoming the core repo that we'll be using for this site. The main one, if you go to YouAreRAD.org, is actually private, and right now I'm just porting that over in a more friendly open source format. But the things that are missing on that repo and missing on the private repo as well are all, for the most part, backend related. Lots and lots of pieces missing there. Having a more robust monthly giving program is one of my biggest focuses right now. I really want giving to RAD monthly to mean something and be more impactful. At the very least, assigning Discord roles to people. At the very least, being able to have some kind of authentication and interaction for them on the site that's unique. We want to build our monthly donation system and just our donation system in general in a different way. So I'm currently reapproaching that as well and looking for tons of help there. We need a back end dashboard for all of this, for the people on our team with no coding experience to be able to see. I've tried using Tanner's like React table, and doing that, but we
Might be
want to
time
move
for
out of
retool.
Supabase for that use case. I've looked at Retool, as potential, just doing all of it through Retool.
My
But
roommate
we
and
need a
my
much more
CTO
consistent.
used to work there. I'm sure that he'd be more than happy to help out and get you guys on like the charity plan and whatnot too. Like we can figure this all out. Like these people are just here watching the stream.
If we can get on some kind of free plan, that would be great. Retool would be super. It would make things so much easier for us here, because I need to take PayPal donations and Venmo donations. I need to take Twitch subscriptions. I need to take Stripe payments, and I need to have all of that compiled and within one big database, one living record, and that doesn't exist yet. It's pulling it from all over the place, and it looks messy. It's hard to interact with. It's hard to search through. Even Stripe has a lot of issues when it comes to this, like, how to actually find these payments that have been made. You can't search by meta tag. There's so many issues. Monthly giving's easier to look at, but when you accept real-time donations and people can do customizable amount, you have to just create a new product every single time or a new payment every single time, and you can't search through that. They're all unique. There's so many issues there, but
These are the specific
like
class of problems that more experienced developers are useful for. And it's almost like enlightening for me in a way that like these being the things that you're struggling with enough to not have done yet and be able to bring up here, it really highlights to me like a line between the things somebody realistically can do through raw effort themselves versus the ones that are like significantly harder to untenable. And it feels like what's left is the stuff that's over that line now, legitimately. Like, I know you could power through a lot of these things, but like building a stable architecture for generically, or for applying like a generic set on top of 15 different ways money comes in to manage that's like a hard product problem, a hard infrastructure problem, a hard integration problem, a hard data management problem, a hard database architecture and like design problem. There's so many pieces there that just inherently come from years of experience and watching it go wrong. And these problems are also a lot scarier because when they fail, they can do much worse things, especially on the data side. So to those watching who have dealt with things that sound like this before, especially like the synchronization of your Stripe, your database, and a bunch of other things that integrate there too, reach out either to me or Jason. We can figure something out, even maybe like make a weekly office hour in Discord, or people can hop in my Discord and chat about it there. How about before my show next week on Wednesday noon, we'll do a sync with anybody who's interested in my Discord.
That would be incredible.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's done.
That would be huge.
I'll make the event afterwards, and anybody who's interested in helping in any way with RAD, do that. And also, I know I say this a lot, but it's usually for sub fishing. I'm doing okay right now. Y'all have a lot of money. You're programmers. If you're not making a lot of money, we can talk about fixing that, but you probably are. Throw some of that to these guys. RAD needs it. They're going to actually help people live better lives, maybe even like live at all. And the amount that helps is so much more than almost anything you can do on this damn site. So !RAD in chat will give you a link to YouAreRAD. Set up a monthly subscription there if you're down, because as Jason mentioned before, that makes it way easier for them to budget, plan, and help more people get therapy.
That would be, yes, please. If you can, please, by all means do. And if anything breaks in that monthly, in that checkout, definitely let me know. Yeah, because sometimes things break there. It's Gosh, there's so many things, and two, like, as we figure this out from Rad's side. Oh, thank you so much for the donation. Uh, as we figure it out from Rad's side, the plan is to consistently make all of this stuff open source and available. Um, it's just like the giveaway site. We figured out how to do this in a way that costs no money to charities, which usually these things take a fortune. They take 10-15% off of your giveaway. Um, and now it's steadily becoming open source so that anybody could just run their own giveaway. Even the legal paperwork is all like super high standard and just auto fills in with a config. Same thing if we were to make a full donation system with the backend dashboard and all that stuff. Yeah, we're just going to put it right back out there so that other charities can do the same.
It sounds like phenomenal opportunities for a lot of people here. Also, before I forget, Mark already said that he can help with the charity tier for Retool. So definitely we'll get that figured out after.
Let's go.
People want to help. We're all hacking at how to line another pocket layer for Jeff Bezos, and you're giving us the opportunity to actually help people. As thankful as you may feel, we're just, if not even more so, thankful to have these opportunities. Do you know how cool it is for me to bring someone like you on to talk about how the 100+ people who watch me every week can actually do something that helps the world with their skills and their knowledge and their money? This is so cool, and thank you for that.
Oh no, I don't even know what to say. It's just yeah. I think this is just how things can be. I love it. Accepting help is hard. I'm totally aware of the irony of offering help for a living and being in a place where I still don't often ask for help. So gotta keep working on that one.
Isn't that literally how you started your story here today? You needed help surviving, and you figured the best way to do that was to help someone else survive.
Yeah. Yep. It is a pattern of sorts, but we get better over time. And I can tell, with the nonprofit in general, that's typically where we get bottlenecked, is just asking for support, asking for help. I've still got emails I need to send to GitHub and Vercel and Next.js to get them to support us as well. I know Vercel sponsors our website, but I've been meaning to follow up with them about just donating.
There's people here from these places watching. I know that. And I'm sure all of them are more than happy to chat. If you're not already following Jason and chatting with him there, I will !Jason in chat once more. I should share this on YouTube quick too, so the YouTube folk have it as well. Definitely recommend reaching out to him directly. He is awesome. Hit up Jason and make it so the success we've all had in this world can make a much bigger difference.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. Now it's time to break this loop of not asking for, I don't want to say asking for help, because I understand your repulsion to that feeling and term. This isn't asking for help. This is offering assistance as an opportunity to others. You're offering the opportunity to be involved, and that's so much cooler than asking for help.
Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah.
There might be somebody who's in the same position you were when you started this story, where they don't know what they could do to feel better, and the way they do that is helping. And I guarantee there are some people in chat right now who aren't doing great, who are going to feel a lot better because they help.
Yeah. That's how a community works. The community supports each other, and you're able to reach into that community, pull from. Yeah.
They care a lot. For the sake of the next Jason, open up these opportunities. If somebody else was doing what you were doing when you started doing this, you would have been on top of that so fast. Give these guys the same
Oh, then
opportunity.
you better ask for help. You just got to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. That is very true. And yeah, if people have the time, I would love for them to help. That's what we need. We need monthly donors. We need to find deeper support from, I think, groups within the space, like companies within the space, and we need some of this just like nose to the ground grinding for code. This backend donor system is absolutely an issue. And we've even noticed it exiting May that donations made on the site, and we've got most of them, but some we see on Stripe, we don't see on our database, and that means those people aren't getting thanked. That means they're not, people that we know to reach out for to support us in the future. It's all, we got to solve that problem swiftly. So any help with that would be huge.
You're chatting to the right people for that. I have a feeling that there will be some people reaching out. And next Wednesday at noon in my Discord, make sure you're there so we can have a chat about how any of y'all can get involved and help with this. It could be a great first open source project. It could be a great last open source project. It can be a great thing in between. Whatever you want to do to help, do it. And if you haven't already donated and you're listening, fix that. It's like $5. It all helps. You're giving people access to therapy that they might not have access to otherwise. And it's such an awesome cause to be able to help.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do want to open up the opportunity for questions from chat. I've seen a bunch of awesome ones snuck in throughout that I haven't been able to get to. One, I'm waiting for y'all to drop more questions. I want to quickly ask one that I do remember, which is somebody wanted us to dig a bit more into how to be better at Google, like tips on how to use that as a resource, because it's something that we like touched on and clearly we've like built systems for. But I'd love from like your perspective, what works in your Google process and how did you learn how to search for things?
Yeah. The process of doing this, I think something I've noticed is how exactly Google's algorithm works, and working with that instead of against that is a huge thing. If you ever look at the analytics for Google, if you even look at like YouTube analytics, one of the things you'll consistently see every year, one of the top trends is the year itself. So people aren't just Googling how to code, they're Googling how to code 2022. That is a consistent thing. I always go into that similar framework. Is I'm coding, I want to learn how to code, and I want the most relevant piece of information. However, people who are good at SEO know that, and they consistently update old answers, old documents with 2022. Stack Overflow does this as well, where they consistently go back through their old documents and they update the SEO on their articles to read updated this month, 2022. So you still get really old answers. But that is technically an artificial thing that you can actually Google around. So if I'm looking up React Suspense and I want to know more about the new feature of Suspense, one of the things that I'll do is when I Google React Suspense, I'll click on Tools under the Google search, and I'll set any time to past month. And if I really wanted to specify, instead of wrapping it in quotes, I can click all results and then click verbatim. Now I'm only seeing React Suspense, and I'm seeing articles that popped up within that time frame. This is something that makes it really, really easy to get the most relevant information. Being able to also figure out what I call like sources of truth, I think is really important as you go through Google. And these I think are more experience based, but like as I'm looking through some of these searches and I see logrocket.com, I know it's going to be an entire SEO focused article about the answer. And sometimes there's solutions, but it's lower on my tier list. I don't tend to trust that as much. Dev.to, same kind of thing. Dev.to, I rank a little bit higher because there's almost always just the code, and a lot of the times, thankfully, a link to a repo. I love that. The link to the repo is huge. Sometimes I just skip the article and go straight to the repo. Um, but the authors of these individual articles vary. So, not always the case that you want to go straight to that. What I tend to look at really, really highly and score really highly is actual GitHub links where I can see people working on stuff and what exactly they're doing. If I'm searching, this is something that I get super annoyed with, but Next.js, if you wrap a button, a custom button, with a next link, you will get use ref errors in your console. Um, that was something that blew my mind. And looking that up, yeah, you're going to find a lot of nonsense. But the search results that come up in GitHub are people who are filing issues over and over again and annoying the devs with that. That's where the solution is. There are dev2s, there are code snippets, there are log rockets, all kinds of nonsense like that. There's even some Reddit posts about it. The answer is in the GitHub. And honestly, I look for the most combative person who posts in GitHub because that's the one the dev is going to respond to because they're annoyed. This person's like, next link is broken. It has use ref issues. I know that a really annoyed dev is going to respond to that and be like, no, you're dumb. This is the solution. And that is the Google tiers. The solution to that, by the way, is to either create a use ref wrapper, which I think is way too much extra work. The wrapping it in an anchor link gives you two tabbable focuses, which also is not good. Just wrap it in a normal div. That's it. That will actually get rid of that error. It drove me crazy how long I looked for a solution to that in a GitHub issue. I also really like to, as I'm Google searching for things, be very particular about keywords. That's really all Google is doing. It scrubs a lot of other things. Your keywords are what actually matters. And so when I'm looking through like trending or current UI UX trends, like I'll just Google that. As I'm typing that out, the first thing that comes up is 2022. Right after that, of course. And there's going to be tons of these videos here, usually videos that somebody has made to purposely target certain keywords and try and make as much money off of it. Probably not as helpful. I feel like when I'm Googling things, watching a video about it is like, I'm so desperate at that point. Like I actually cannot find anything anywhere. And now I'm listening to a gigantic advertisement instead.
Sorry for
I
contributing
try and
there. There's a lot of knowledge that I've put in these videos that doesn't exist anywhere else. And I do feel bad. I need to write it and put it somewhere else, but busy.
I mean, for some people, that's how they consume the most. I think because I'm just like aggressively searching through stuff, text is so much easier. I can copy and paste it. It almost always has a GitHub link to it or within it. But yeah, looking up these UI trends, it's knowing again that's trust. Like there's going to be a bunch of junk links on here. People just focused on SEO that are, these are just gigantic advertisements that look like websites. Coming down as I'm searching through some of these UI trends 2022 is getting an idea of what are the websites that actual people invested in UI and UX utilize. So I might even refine this instead as in UI UX psychology. what are things that somebody who's actually invested in UI and UX, what do they actually look for? What are they actually interested? UX Planet, UXdesign.cc. Actual UI developers seem to be involved in those sites to some degree. Sometimes I'll even look at Reddit, where I'm not looking exactly for the answer there, but I am looking for people who want to become better UI and UX devs, or researchers, and seeing where they are being pointed to review portfolios, where they're being pointed to study more and read up more. Um, Inevitably, I end up finding really, really unique websites that I pin. I think I've shared some of those to you in the past, but I can
You
link
find the
some
most
of these.
interesting shit.
I love reading through stuff like this. This is one of my all time favorites that I've come across, which was somebody who is essentially just trying to create a source of truth, by taking exactly from like very popular design systems and seeding out the commonalities. Um, so if I want to create a button from scratch, this is how Slack, Asana, um, Zendesk, Uber, Reddit makes buttons. And these are the things that those buttons have in common. And these are where those buttons differ. And here's links to the actual repository to those design systems where that button exists. So you can look at that as well. Here's the anatomy broken down, the HTML structure broken down. Um, this site is nuts.
You got chat freaking out over this one. People are digging this resource a lot.
I love it.
And this is the thing, like this is a huge part of why you leveled up so fast is the way you find resources is fascinating. Like I learned 3 things about Googling here, which is really cool. I one piece you touched on that I want to dig in on a bit more because like we touched on it a bit. This idea of vetting the person more than the solution almost before you start to vet the solution. It's identify if the creator of this resource is applying knowledge to problems that overlap with yours enough that their solutions make sense for you to consider. Like if you have some problem with Stripe and you see an article that looks right, but the guy who wrote it does nothing but Swift and iOS dev, and you know that, it's a lot easier to not spend half an hour reading about something where all the syntax is unfamiliar to you because it's not even the same programming language you're in. And your choice to focus in on the people in a way and their applications of things. It's the same reason that like you go to GitHub and the way you describe the GitHub issue thing, the best place to find an answer is when somebody asks the dumb question the dumb aggressive way and then the creator of that thing responds with exactly what should be done in the exact way they intend for it to be used. That is like one of the most powerful hacks I think you described here is the ways in which you understand the persona and the thought process of the person who's writing the answer you're looking for.
Thank you. That's I think it's actually quite interesting. But it is exactly that. It is, yeah, search engine optimization. It is very much looking into the psychology. It is very much looking at the individual. And yeah, like not only is somebody inevitably going to post an issue on a repo that is insulting, um, or they're going to post it in a way that's insulting, but the response to that is always going to be the most clever thing. Sometimes something that the developer didn't even initially think. Um, I actually really like to be open to those kinds of comments because we get defensive and we come up with a solution just to throw it in someone's face. And so, yeah, if you are looking through Next, if you have questions about Next that you don't see in the docs, check the issues. You will see Lee in them battle it out. Sometimes you will see,
Dallas is
oh
in
my
there a
gosh,
bunch now.
Guillermo's in there from time to time. If
Devin.
he's in there, he's fighting people in there. It's great.
Yeah, I
Um,
love those threads. I've recently been having a lot of fun in the remix issues and pull requests, even though I'm not like using remix. There are some very interesting conversations going on in there, especially around type safety. Poor Colin, the creator of
mm,
Zod and like the person who wrote the first two commits for TRPC, has a pull request open, adding like full stack type safety with generics to remix, and they're just battling it out.
that's it's like a donation at that point.
Right? That's how a lot of us feel. But like their argument is over the network, nothing is guaranteed. And in a way, this would be lying to you. Because if you have like in your TRPC backend, you return a map or a date, and that goes over the wire as JSON, it comes back in as strings, unless you use something like super JSON to transform it like TRPC does. This doesn't do that. It just lets you infer a type from back to front. So it can lie to you. That combined with if the backend changes underneath you while you're like navigating the site, like you change what that returns, your code expects it to be in one shape, but it's actually in a different shape. So TypeScript is wrong and lying. Cool. Without it, you're way worse off because nobody's validating the response from their loader. It's right there. They have the data. Why would they like write a checker for what they're getting back from equivalent, like effectively get server side props? You don't check to make sure the data's right. You use it. And TypeScript will at least tell you what to expect. So I'm not as on board with their framing here. It sucks because when I read that and I saw more examples, I started getting much more of like where remixes patterns could bring me value. But I'm learning that through watching them battle it out over type safety.
Yes. Yeah. That's just how it goes, and it's interesting. It's not like it's necessary, but inevitably that's how it works, right? Like you can do the same thing on Reddit in general with literally any kind of question. If you just ask a dumb enough question, somebody will take advantage of that opportunity to call you dumb while also giving you the answer. Um, just so annoying, but yeah, I think I've learned a lot about Remix, as well as tons of other packages and approaches entirely through their issues. Um, the issue section of their repo, anyways. Um,
Pull requests as well. I think that those are an underrated way to learn about things. Like a question I get a lot is I'm starting my first job at a big company, and I don't think that's an experience you've had of like diving into this huge code base where all the decisions are made, but your strategy here is exactly how you do that. When you're at a company, you can't Google search a lot of the problems because those problems are proprietary and specific to that company's implementation. The best way to learn that is not to like Google search or just bash at it until it works. It's look at how people solve these problems usually. Look through the pull requests and see what people are changing and why they're changing it. Look at the discussions of how they figure things out that way. Look at if there are issues, look at those for sure. But I tend to find that like the next step for this, once you're changing the code base that we're talking about, is to see what changes and why it's changing. And you can get so much from that. And I really love how much of this discussion has come back to like using GitHub and using code output solutions, using that other side. That's what we're creating to help us in the creation process rather than looking to resources like video and documentation and blog posts. You're looking at how others solve the problem rather than how they tell you to solve the problem. And you can learn so much from that.
yeah, it's it comes back to that piece of just like looking at the individual and seeing what they do, how they approach things, um, what they use in argument, what they use in production, what they use in for fun, for development, um, and being able to see that this is a trusted source of information. Um, and that's not easy to do. I think it's a skill that builds up, but as much that comes up in a Google search result, it is still not so much that you won't consistently see the same things over and over again. You will always see Stack Overflow. You will always see div.to. You will always see the same kinds of results. Being able to recognize as those results come up, the websites that are usually accurate, the sources of truth on an individual level become really, really critical. And, even within those sources of truth, Twitter is actually great as well. I'm still getting used to finding answers on Twitter, but you don't even have to post. Like, these are things where sometimes somebody just goes on Twitter and they're like, holy shit, I had no idea this was a thing, just in case anybody else is struggling with it. And it'll come up in SEO from time to time. Those are usually great. And then that person gets lit up in real time as people subtweet them or directly comment on them. And then you learn even more. Twitter's vicious, but some good answers can be found there.
One of something just funny that happened earlier today. I had a tweet a week or two, probably 2 to 3 weeks ago at this point, about React Query. Instead of doing a bunch of weird async use effect stuff, just pass React Query the async function and take what it gives you, rather than building your own 5-hook deep solution that has a bunch of bugs and edge cases. And today, weeks later, somebody quote tweeted this, or they didn't even quote tweet it. Somebody said, I haven't been the same since I saw that tweet about React Query over use effect. And somebody replied, what tweet? And then I got quote tweeted, which is how I saw it. But like, subtweeting in a positive way, like my shit posting impacted them enough to say something about it weeks later. And it's crazy how much those dumb things do. Also, super loud outside. One sec.
Wholesome. It's usually those stories don't end so wholesome.
It's been, for how shitposty I am surprised how positive and wholesome things tend to go in the community. Like, we've got a bunch of people jobs. We've helped people get some cool opportunities. We have made real impact in the frameworks we use. I have some really good inside info on next things that we definitely helped instigate that I'm proud of. It's rad that we've like shitpost our way to real impact and success over here in the T3 community.
That's the way you got to go about it. It seems if you can make it into a meme and do good, like, you're going to do a lot of good. If you're just doing good, you got to figure out the meme. That's trying to figure that out too.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to wrap up. This has been a phenomenal 2 hours. Definitely one of my favorites I've done of the show so far. Any last things you want to shout out or put a spotlight on?
No, I just want to thank you for doing this. Thank you for having me on. I can't wait until we go through a bunch of this stuff on Wednesday. I'll be in an asking for help mood and mindset, or asking for, not asking for, I will be providing opportunities to be involved mindset.
Really excited for those opportunities to be shared and for people to get involved.